What if the Islamic Republic of Iran collapses overnight? Would it bring long-awaited peace to the Middle East, or plunge the region into chaos? In this video, we explore how regime change in Iran could transform not just the country, but the entire balance of power across the region. Current Iranian regime. Brief overview. Iran today is ruled by a theocratic system. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, holds ultimate control over the government, military, and judiciary. Beneath him is the Revolutionary Guard, or IRGC, a powerful paramilitary force that not only protects the regime but also projects Iran's influence across the Middle East. Over decades, Iran has built a regional network of armed proxies: Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria. This network forms what Iran calls the axis of resistance, a direct challenge to you. Allies and Western influence. What could regime change look like? Regime change in Iran could take many forms: a mass uprising like the 1979 revolution, a military coup from within the IRGC, or external intervention, such as war or covert operations. Whatever the method, the outcome would send shockwaves across the region. A sudden power vacuum in Tehran would create confusion, not just inside Iran, but across every country where Iran has strategic influence. Impact on proxy groups. Iran's proxies depend heavily on Tehran's financial, military, and ideological support. If the central regime falls, Hezbollah in Lebanon could weaken or fracture. The Houthis in Yemen might lose their primary backer. Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria could face internal collapse or fragmentation. This could lead to temporary relief in some areas, but in others, it could create power vacuums that extremist groups like ISIS might exploit. How would Israel and the Gulf states react? For Israel, the fall of Iran's regime might be seen as a victory, especially if it means the end of support for Hezbollah and a halt to Iran's nuclear ambitions. But Israeli security experts also warn, instability in Iran could be just as dangerous. Loose weapons, rogue commanders, and refugee flows could create new security threats. Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE might celebrate the fall of their regional rival. But a destabilized Iran could also ignite sectarian unrest in their own Shia populations. And a civil war in Iran would be too close for comfort. What about the global powers? The United States has long advocated for political reform in Iran, even regime change. But past experiences, like Iraq and Libya, show that removing a regime is the easy part. What comes next is often violent, unstable, and unpredictable. Russia, Iran's ally in Syria, would lose a strategic partner, affecting its influence across the Levant. China, which has deep energy and trade ties with Iran, would seek stability above all else. It would likely oppose any sudden transition that could disrupt trade and energy flows. Internal fallout inside Iran. A post-regime Iran would not be smooth sailing. Various factions would compete for power, from reformists and monarchists to ethnic minorities like Kurds, Baloch, and Arabs. There's also the risk of a civil war between rival political, religious, and military groups. The IRGC, even without the clerics, may not go quietly. They could form their own government, or even a military dictatorship. Meanwhile, Iran's economy, already under strain, could collapse entirely, leading to humanitarian disaster. Regional stability, more or less. So, would the region become more stable? Not necessarily. Yes, new, democratic Iran could eventually bring peace, reintegration, and cooperation with the West. But in the short term, regime change would likely trigger proxy conflicts collapsing, ethnic uprisings inside Iran, power struggles spilling across borders, and new threats from extremist groups filling the void. In essence, the end of Iran's theocratic regime would be just the beginning of a much larger geopolitical gamble. Closing thoughts. Regime change in Iran is more than a political shift. It would shake the foundation of Middle Eastern politics, affecting everything from nuclear talks and proxy wars to global oil markets and strategic alliances. The real question is not just what happens if Iran's regime falls, but who picks up the pieces when it does?